In today's video, we're going to be painting up an Ankheg from Reaper Miniatures. Okay, so what we're going to be doing today is I'm actually going to be starting off with something a little bit different. I'm going to try out the new Citadel contrast paints here, and I've got gore-grunta fur. And so for this, and it's a test, I have never used these contrast paints before, as I've actually gone and primed the miniature here. So I've just gone on with Vallejo white grey primer, sorry, not a white, it's a very light grey primer, and I've placed that on there, just giving it a nice coat with our primer, and just coming on with these contrast paints here, and they're actually really interesting to use. They're sort of like using a wash, and they give out quite a bit of detail. And I also gave this a quick test as well on the Reaper Miniatures without any of the primer on there, and it just didn't stick onto it at all. So if you want to do that with any Reaper Miniatures, the best thing you want to do is to prime them to start off with. But you can see it actually gives out quite a cool effect, and gives sort of basically a wash and a paint job all in one, and it's really interesting to use. So I also quite like the colour that's come out in this. And then of course I'm just going over the back of our Ankheg here, as well as I'm also going to be painting the inside like carapace bits of the belly as well on the Ankheg, the exact same colour. So don't forget to do that as well while you're doing this. And just also one thing with the contrast paints is you want to be pretty precise with them. So if you have to, get a smaller brush to just get the area you want in them. Otherwise it can cause a lot of spillover. And then once we have all that complete, what we're going to do is we're going to come in now with a fur brown. I'm going to use the fur brown to just paint up the legs and the other parts of the face of the Ankheg, just up here where the two bits of carapace meet each other as well. I'm going to also be painting that up with our fur brown, and also the legs I'm going to be doing the exact same colour, and being pretty careful, and also just using a little bit to cover up any of the spills that we've had over with our contrast paint, because they get all over the place. So just covering them up with ordinary paint is a good way to just get rid of all that contrast paint pretty quickly. Then once we have all that complete, we're going to come in now with Daemonic Yellow. I'm going to use the Daemonic Yellow to be painting up the little mandibles that our Ankheg has on him, and it's going to be just a nice pop of colour onto this miniature. That's going to be a lot of browns on it, so just giving it a pop with that yellow is really going to make it stand out. So just being reasonably careful. Now come with a smaller brush if you have to, and of course don't forget to paint the underside of the mandibles as well. Then once we have our mandibles painted up, what we're going to do now is we're going to come in with matte black. I'm going to use the matte black to just paint up all the tips of the legs of the Ankheg. So if you're finding this a little bit difficult with a big brush, just switch to a slightly smaller brush, and we're just trying to get as close as we can to the little stopping points that the miniature has on it. So just going in there, making sure you give them a nice coat. Now my matte black's a little bit runny because I mixed it with just a little bit too much water. I do mix a lot of my paints with just a little bit of water, so just be a little bit careful of that as well while you're covering that up if you mix it with too much water like I did. But then once we have that complete, what we're going to do now is we're going to move on with dirt spatter. I'm going to use the dirt spatter, which is a really dark brown. I'm going to use this to be painting all the dirt and stuff at the bottom of this miniature, because it looks like it's bursting up from the ground. So we want that nice real muddy texture and look. So that's why I'm going with a dirt spatter, and I'm painting it on sort of reasonably thick, and also sort of dabbing it a little bit just to give it a little bit of texture on there. It's probably pretty hard to see on camera, but in person you can see that just by dabbing it like that, it gives it a sort of like speckling effect, which makes it just look a little bit more like actual dirt. Then once all our dirt is complete, what we're going to do now is we're going to move on with uniform grey, which is sort of bluish grey, and we're going to be using this to paint up all the stones, because it has little stones in the texture base, sort of like it's popped up from the ground underneath the earth, and all the stone and mud popped out from it. So uniform grades to give us a nice blue-grey texture, which I thought would just go well with these colours and sort of pop against all this brown that we have on here. So that's why I've gone for that colour, and just picking them out nice and neat as you possibly can. Use a smaller brush if you have to for some of the smaller ones, because there is quite a lot on here. So don't be afraid to switch to that smaller brush if you need to. So now what we're going to be doing is we're going to be moving on with a pure red, and we're going to be using this to paint the eyes of the Ankheg. So just making sure you've got a nice fine tip on your brush, and just getting just a small dollop of paint on the end of your brush, and then just slightly dabbing it more than brushing it onto the area where the eye is. So just being very careful, being precise as you can. Now if you don't like the way your eyes have turned out, you can just either quickly wipe it off or wait for it to completely dry, go over it with a brown, and then try again. Now I'm actually only painting two little eyes on the front of this. It's a little hard to tell if it actually has eyes on the front here or not, but I'm going to be doing those as well. So it's got 4 eyes on this monster. Then now that we have those eyes complete, what we're going to do now is we're going to move on with Desert Yellow, and we're going to be using this Desert Yellow as a dry brush, and we're going to be dry brushing over the carapace of our Ankheg. So just making some light passes, really trying to catch the edges of our Ankheg here, which has quite a lot of texture on the back of it here. So just really going in there, making nice small quick passes and trying to avoid everywhere else that we've painted if you can. That's why I've got this really small brush here that's a dry brush, which I find really good for working in little areas that just need a dry brush, just little pieces, or in the case of this, like where it has the antenna and stuff, and I'm trying to avoid a lot of places. Just coming in here with the small dry brush is a really good tool to have with you if you have access to it. Otherwise, just try your best to keep your dry brushing to the area you're trying to, and if not, just go back over with the original paint to cover it back up, or leave it if you want, if it looks like it might be something that you like. You never know. So now with that done, we've basically finished our miniature. So what we're going to do now is we're going to come in with Seraphim Sepia to add in some more detail and just add that extra depth that we like to do here. And we're going with the Seraphim Sepia because I want to give it sort of a skin, like fleshy sort of tint towards all the places that we're placing this on, which are just going to be pretty much our areas that we painted the fur brown. So we're doing this on the legs, our bits of I don't know what you call this, flesh I guess, as well here, and just really giving a nice coat with the Seraphim Sepia. It's going to tint it sort of, I don't know how you'd say it, maybe an orangey type colour, which is going to make it just stand out a little bit more from all the browns we're going on here. So, and also don't forget the underside here, just being really careful to try and avoid our places that we don't want our Seraphim Sepia to be as well. Then once all that Seraphim Sepia is dry, what we're going to do now is we're going to come in with nuln oil, and we're going to be placing the nuln oil over everything we didn't place our Seraphim Sepia on. So we're going to be going over the back of the carapace of our Ankheg. We're going to be also doing it on the underside as well as our base that it's on, so all the little rocks and the mud that we've got here. Just really going in with, pretty hard with the Seraphim Sepia here for the underbelly, because I really want to get those dark shadows in here. But if it's starting to pull up too much, what you can do is you can just come back in with your brush with nothing on it, touch it in the place where there's too much, and the brush will soak up the wash straight away. So it's nice and easy to get rid of if you don't want a huge effect of a wash, or you don't want it pulling up there and having sort of like a big black splodge. So just go, of course, coming over here, going all over the base as well. And the reason why I've done this as well is I've gone with the nuln oil to give it that black highlight to separate it out from our Seraphim Sepia wash, and it'll just really differentiate all the browns that we've got going on here with doing those two different washes. So now what we're going to do is we're going to be going on to the base, which is just prime black, and I'm going to grab some Vallejo earth texture, and we're going to be placing this on the base. Since our miniature was reasonably easy to paint and not too many colours to do, I always like to add in just some extra flair on the base when doing these, just to give it that little bit more cooler effect when it's on the table. And also with doing the base, how we're going to do it as well, we're also going to make the miniature pop out a lot more and sort of subtract a lot from all the browns that we've got going on here as well, by adding a bit of effects to the base and so on. Then once we have our Vallejo earth texture dry, what we're going to do now is we're going to come in with a dirt spatter, which is what we used originally for our mud on our base, and we're going to be painting the whole thing up and waiting for it to dry. And then once it's dry, I'm going to go back over top of it again with the nuln oil to tie it right into that base, and you'll see why we're going to do this a little bit later on. Okay, now that we have all that painted up and dry, you can see I've placed just a little bit of PVA glue around the base here, and I've just grabbed some of this grass flocking that I have, and we're going to be placing that on the base. And what I've done is I've just gone around the edge of the base that I want with our glue for our grass flock, to sit on there, and I've just made it a little bit wider than the ordinary base, which is why we painted up the whole earth texture with the same color as we did the base of our miniature to tie it all in. And I just want to give it that little bit more area of effect of where it's popped out from as well. And with that, we have completed our Ankheg miniature. Now, it was quite an easy miniature to paint up. A lot of simple colours in there, but what we've done is we've tried to separate them out as much as we can by using our two different coloured washes, painting them just slightly different browns, as well as having our dirt be a very dark colour to separate that out as well from all those different browns, adding on that flock to the base to really brighten everything up, as well as our yellow mandibles also to brighten everything up and just separate out from being a lot of brown on brown. But with that, I hope this has been a helpful tool for you to use, and I can't wait to see you in the next video.